We are now going to hear from Hannane Amanpour, a JD candidate at the George Washington University Law School, who wants to share her story and the story of her father as one example of members of the Iranian American communities who are represented here today. Please welcome Hannane.
Hello, and thank you. I'm very honored to be here today and to have the opportunity to share my story with all of you. Like many of the brave people demonstrating against the regime in the streets of Iran, I too was not even alive at the time of the Iranian Revolution. In fact, I have never even lived in Iran. But the reign of Khomeini's terror has nevertheless haunted me my entire life. Ironically, I have what most would consider an unlikely set of parents that would choose to dedicate their lives and death, in the case of my father, to overthrowing the religious fascism ruling Iran. My father came from a blue-blooded family, members of Iran's aristocracy with leading roles under the Shah. He was sent to study in the United States, where he met my mother while studying at UC Berkeley. My mother is American, with roots in Scandinavia, but by any definition, born and raised an American. After completing their schooling, together they made the decision to move to Iran, where they later married, where my two older sisters were born, and where they remained for over 10 years until after the revolution, before ultimately returning to the US, where I would later be born. As is the story of so many others, the Khomeini regime murdered my father in 1988. I was only 5 years old at the time, but even 33 years later, that day is forever etched in my memory. And the suffering that my family endured following his death rests solely on the shoulders of the Khomeini regime. My father was a good man. He cared deeply about the fate of his homeland and about preserving human rights and women's rights. He loved his religion and was repulsed by the idea of fundamentalist clerics manipulating and distorting it in furtherance of evil. And these were the very same values that drew him to the Mujahideen Khalq. It is true that the example my parents set for me shaped my life in remarkable ways. But I am now myself mother to 2 daughters. And that is why I continue to stand here today, hand in hand with my brave brothers and sisters in the streets of Iran. I am now the example setter, and I stand with the Mujahideen Khalq on my own accord. I stand with them because, like my father, I care about human rights, I care about women's rights, and I care about Islam and the Muslim world. And the Mujahideen Khalq are the best and only option to deliver on these issues, unique in every respect. Not the fundamentalist clerics, not the remnants of the Shah, and not the West. The atrocities carried out by the Iranian regime over the last 4 decades are nothing short of a massacre that should appall any human being. Amazingly, even several decades later, myself and thousands upon thousands of others can still understand and relate to the suffering and pain that the people of Iran continue to experience. The difference, of course, being that their lives are on the line every single day. And this is precisely why we must hold Raisi accountable. It can never be acceptable for an entire generation to be brought up cloaked by terror. Raisi's reign of terror began long before this generation, and even the one before it, and it must end now. There is light at the end of this road, though, and the Mujahideen are it. They embody the values of peace and equality shared by the Iranian people. By embracing Ms. Maryam Rajavi's 10-point plan, we are in fact embracing a free and democratic Iran. The prospects for change have never been as definite as they are right now. The people of Iran are thirsty for change, and they need us, freedom-loving people around the world, to stand with them. Thank you.